Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the Music Mentality Podcast, the official second one. If you're listening to us right now live, then you must be some kind of psychic because we are not live, in fact, and we are just recording because Twitch's servers are down. So if you would like to interact with us, go contact Twitch right now. And send me a message letting us know that the servers are up. So I am your host, Jacob. As we said last week, everyone else introduce yourselves, go in order. You know the order.
Hey, I'm Brain.
Oh.
Nice.
Oh,
And I also go to a prestigious school and play a lot of jazz guitar. So
cool.
I have credibility and I know what I'm talking about. I've been playing guitar longer than you can conceive. All right? Time stretches infinitely backwards and forwards.
This
and I've been playing
Brain, this isn't a plug yourself moment. This is a just say, hey, I'm Brain. Jonathan's supposed to be the next person. But yeah. Jonathan, introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah, I'm next. Oh, hey, guys, I'm Jonathan. I'm the one that didn't succeed.
Nice. Josue?
What, do I have to say anything?
No, you don't. I guess I already introduced everyone by saying their names, but Josue, say your name and introduce yourself.
Is it my turn?
Yes. How do we not have this order by now?
We could redo it.
I see all of y'all like in different squares. It's so not in order. My name is Josue. I'm incredible.
That's true. All right.
Sure.
Jonathan, we're not redoing anything because even though it's not live, it's live, and I don't want to do any editing. So this is the official second podcast. Okay. With that started, let's get into it. Going in order, remind you the order is Brain, Jonathan, Josue, and then me. We're going clockwise according to the stream, or at least the video. Brain, what have you been listening to this week?
All right, I've been really excited to tell y'all. For whatever reason, all right, I've been listening to the most aggressive and heavy stuff I could get my hands on. I don't know why. I did listen to the new Tool album, right? And I mainly listened to jazz. And that sparked a lot of just me craving heavy music. And so along with like Meshuggah, right? And 12-Foot Ninja and some of the typical sludgy Acacia strain, you know, the real heavy groups, I found myself listening to Black Angels by George Crumb. I don't know why. And I was again gripped by the part where it's like, Unza! And you hear like them shouting, right? Mm-hmm. Man, what a crazy piece. And then, of course, I watched The Rite of Spring, the Joffrey Ballet. And so a lot of really intense music. I don't know why. But
it's definitely like, I don't know if Black Angels, we would call it metal. But all of those are pretty metal. Like Rite of Spring in itself was metal before metal, right?
Exactly. So that's what I've been doing.
So funny enough that you mentioned the George Crumb thing. This is going to tie into my topic because I've been researching grad schools for composition, and I was just going school to school, looking at who were the teachers at these schools, right? You know, and listening to their music. Surprisingly, a lot of academic composers don't have their music readily available. Like there was one who had an opera called like The Death of Anton Webern or something, and it was like an opera, and I couldn't find it anywhere, and I'm like, that sounds like the dopest opera, but I'm so disappointed that I can't find it.
That does sound amazing, bro.
I wonder if the whole thing would be like serialistic, or if it's just like a normal opera just about Webern's life, you know?
No, it's about his death.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Yes, it's about his death. Yeah. I still want. I was telling Sarah this. She's like working on custom T-shirts, and I want a shirt so bad that's just like a black shirt with white lettering that says "Tonality is dead. We snapped its neck," because that's like the most metal quote in all of classical music. But you mentioned George Crumb. I stumbled upon a school that David Crumb is the teacher of, who is the son of George Crumb, and he's writing music the same as George Crumb.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, I mentioned it to my composition teacher, let me say that, and she said, I wonder if he only got into it because of his father.
Yeah, it's like Shaquille O'Neal's son who plays basketball now, or Dale Earnhardt Jr., driving after his father, right? I mean, do you really want to see the kid try to match and or best their father,
See, but it's interesting because...
Yes, that's
like,
every biblical story.
And it's an Oedipus story.
Yeah, I guess that's
maybe there's something to that.
I mean, I've mentioned that David Crumb thing to multiple people now, and when I say David Crumb, nobody actually knows who he is, which is shocking because I don't want to say he's old, but he's like an elderly academic composer now, and the fact that people still don't know his name says something, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, I suppose it is Jonathan's turn. Jonathan, what have you been listening to?
Let's see. Last night I listened to this guy called Burner for the first time. Somebody put a Facebook post saying he sounds like SPM, so I had to try to listen to him. So like that was all right. Yeah, I don't know who I'm talking about, do y'all?
No idea.
About someone who's all right.
Please elaborate.
It's 'cause I don't think y'all don't really listen to like, rap and stuff, right?
All I wanna do is bang
screw. Okay, we're from Houston, so we kind of have to listen to that music. Just saying.
That's fair.
Besides that, I just listen to like the same Juanes. I really don't change my stuff up. I just like listening to the same songs all the time. I'm boring.
Dope.
Yep. And jazz stuff.
Are you just saying jazz to like fit into the theme of the podcast? Oh yeah, jazz. Yeah.
When I practice, I'm not like trying to learn how to rap like SPM. I have to listen to jazz.
Sure, that's true. I mean, hip hop jazz is like a big thing right now, right? New York is like all hip hop jazz scene. I mean, there's obviously a lot of fusion and stuff going on too, but hip hop jazz is like a big thing now.
That's my dream.
I feel like we could do that, but none of us are black enough, probably.
Nope.
Speak for yourself.
Sway, what about you?
Sway, what have you been listening to this week?
I listen to a lot of stuff, man. I just find like playlists on my like streaming thing. I don't even know what I have. I think I have Spotify or Tidal or something. I don't know. And I just listen to stuff, man. I did listen to, or I revisited. Do you remember that one piece on transmigration of souls?
Mm-hmm. Because of 9/11, right?
I listened to it again, and I was like, man, this piece still hits as heavy as like the first time I heard it, which is really cool. I don't really listen to choir music too often, but that one's just really, really good.
That's is that John Adams?
John Adams, right? Yeah, I think so.
I mean, that's the first name that comes to my mind.
It is.
I don't.
I just saw that on 9/11. Every music major in all of America, their teacher somewhere played that on 9/11.
Actually, no one talked about it at my school, which I'm thankful for, because it's so interesting. Everyone, like everyone else, had that hit hard. And 9/11, I mean, I'm not going to say it's not a tragedy or anything, and just talking about it and watching videos hits hard in general. But
Yeah.
that piece, to me, there's something about, I remember saying this when I first heard it, there's something about classical singing where you're using like good classical technique and you're vibrating a lot and stuff like that, how it doesn't depict the emotion to me as much as it should. Like, I think of Josue and I have been talking about Dear Evan Hansen a lot. I don't know if y'all have heard of it. Dear Evan Hansen's a musical, and one of the things is Ben Platt, the main singer, he had to teach himself literally to like burst into tears on stage, and on the recordings and everything, that dude is like crying through as he's singing, saying screw you to all technique, pretty much, just trying to get through the notes while crying and stuff, right? And on the Transmigration of Souls, I remember a lot of sopranos ringing up at the top, and you couldn't really understand what they were saying, and I was not getting the emotional impact of it at all. I just was like, okay, this is supposed to be this, but they're not translating that idea to me.
I feel like for me, it's not so much. I've always had a hard time understanding words anyway, like lyrics. My ear can't pick that out. For me, what gives me a sense of emotion, what attacks me, is what I hear, the sonic, and that harmony that's just so jagged and dissonant. It hits me, and it terrifies me, dude. It's so terrifying. And I was just like blasting it in the car the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is spooky.
Did you do multiple listens?
I did like 2 listens this week.
I was just curious.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
In a little more detail, what do you mean by terrified? And specifically terrified of what?
Just that harmony, man. It just gives me like goosebumps. You know what I'm saying? It's very eerie.
Do
you know what I'm saying?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Do I know any of the what?
Do you know any of the theory of like what harmony is actually being used?
No.
Okay.
So, yeah, the reason I asked terrified of what, though? Like, really, I want to explore that just because we have open air here to do it. I mean, when I feel very gripped, to be honest, I'm existentially having, like, terror. Like, yeah, the deepest level of terrors. Like, when music is gripping me, I'm thinking about how long is forever going to last, right? And how far was time that way? And how far is it going to go that way? And I'm just, yeah, I mean, I start having existential thoughts, right? Because the music just rings in some ethereal, I'm not going to say Fibonacci way, right? But it just aligns, not that piece specifically either, right? But I'm terrified of, like, I don't even know what, but the great unknown. And something about the music is bringing something unknown right, to my front door, right? And I wasn't really prepared for it. Anyway, I hope that makes any sense. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'll take a stab at it. No. I'll actually take a stab at it. So when you're talking like the existential, so we've talked about this before, those moments of like, I don't even know what you call them, like bliss or like just heart or something. There are moments in music where everything just locks in, right? And you're just like in the moment more than anything, right? And
yeah,
it doesn't happen a lot to me with like pop music. But like I know you guys aren't choir nerds, but choir music to me just tears my heart out, and the right choir piece will do it like every time, right? So are you saying that this existential thing happens to you every time you experience that? Or is it just like specific pieces like Josue is talking about, which is like, I mean, transmigration of souls is, that's kind of an existential piece, right? To some extent.
Yeah. To be honest, rock music rarely does it for me. It's pieces that are more escapey and kind of create this atmosphere. And I feel like, damn, I'm in this little world now, and everything that's happening in here, I'm a victim of, right? And subject to it. But no, every time I'm gripped by music, it is not in a fearful, terrifying way. Often it's a very beautiful kind of way. But no, some pieces, though, do grab me in that kind of way. And that's kind of why I love the Rite of Spring. You know? Because actually, I think Stravinsky captures what it feels like to be waiting on a judgment, or to be walking to the gallows or something. There's this kind of dun, 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 bomb, and it just gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And it's like as the sage is walking in, right? And with every step he takes, the music gets more and more intense. And I feel like, oh, that's what those girls are experiencing, right? That piece resonates with me. Rant over, though.
Any comments on that?
No.
Awesome. I mean, all right. Let's just move on. I can actually talk about that a lot, but I have a little clue that someone might be talking about the Rite of Spring later in our main topics. So we'll go into that a little bit later. So basically, we have a new format for the show. At least it's a test format. In fact, the format's going to be probably different every single episode. Some episodes might actually just be more educational. Some are just going to be us like shooting the breeze about whatever. But this week, everyone has brought something that they think is worthy to talk about onto the show and people should be talking about. And at least some significant topic. And Brain, I would say your topic is definitely significant in the music world.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Absolutely. All right. So I wanted to talk, and this is just for really you two guys, because I want y'all to be turned on to this, right? So I got to thinking about Tool, right? Who are they? It's Maynard James Keenan, who is a phenomenal vocalist in a quartet type of rock group. One guitar, one bass, one drummer, and pretty much their fans are people who like long songs and aren't afraid to, you know, listen to a lot of polyrhythms and 7/8. It's kind of the same crowd that would maybe be into Meshuggah, right? But doesn't like screaming. And so then I got to thinking, why would their fans wait? The last album they put out was called 10,000 Days, and that was in 2006. So their fans have been waiting so long to get this album. The album came out with bonus features and a small screen that has all this bonus footage. And it was like, I believe, $45 or maybe $145 for this album. But anyway, so some of my general thoughts on the album are, it was great. As someone who likes crazy 7/8, 9/8, polymetric type of music, they have it going on. And the guitar tones are immensely awesome. But they're a band who has so much money that, of course, they have the top of the line gear, right? I see Jonathan's taking us on a journey, but it's not going to... So, second, they have these long transitional sections where they're kind of morphing times, and it seems like they're playing forever on a tribal drum beat. And part of why I never liked Tool was because it just feels like a tribal drum beat for 15 minutes, right? And there were some moments where my hand crept towards the mouse to skip maybe 30 seconds or a minute. And every time I stopped myself, and every time I was glad that I did. And something happened, like right where I was going to be skipping. They have amazing and just seamless transitions, right? The album has a super old school feel, and guys, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. These guys are serious musicians, and especially Maynard. The way he can sing across the bar lines reminds me, and I did write this down, it reminds me of like what Geddy Lee, right? And the guy from Dream Theater and some of the other guys who can sing and make you feel at home, even though there's a strange meter happening underneath, right? And they somehow can just tie the music together. Man, I also noticed that their bass player has a very similar bass guitar tone to what Jacob usually uses. It's a very kind of bright and percussive and kind of slap-worthy. And Jacob, I'm sure you have thoughts about this because they are a bass player's like benchmark, wouldn't you say? Or like Jocko and Cliff Burton, Tool.
I don't actually like Tool.
Oh shit.
Oh, so there I did have some actual notes, right? There's a lot of Middle Eastern sounds, sitar and hand drums that are clearly from Asia, some cello, and this is what I thought was cool. They had the bass often above the guitar in the texture. So you have drums, thick, distorted, chunky, meaty, wonderful guitar sitting right through the whole middle, and then bass up top playing even higher in register, not just EQ, but in notes. Yes, often. And because the bass tone is so like aggressive, it works almost as a really clean guitar. Imagine.
Is it like Billy Sheehan tone kind of stuff, where it's basically a guitar?
No, much more like Victor Wooten or Abraham Laboriel. Extremely piano-like. It is lots of solid attack and notes with bang, spank.
Yeah, that's definitely actually very similar to my tone. Interesting.
Yeah.
And they have that on the top.
Often during the transitional sections, guitars down here, dun 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 dun, and basses up high doing something more kind of ambient, pad-like.
How do you feel about that, Jacob? Considering you like the bass because it rests underneath everybody, and that's the opposite.
So it's interesting because there's fundamentals of bass we have to talk about here that so people who don't play bass or even guitar might not know this, but once you start going into the higher register on the instrument, you're actually, in the same way that a bass singer or a cello or any bass instrument would in the high register, is that you're actually still carrying the weight of all of the instrument on the high note. Right? So there's this idea of playing different octaves in different places on the instrument, because if you play a really high note on your low E string, it has a ton of weight and will be super, super boomy, right? And so if we're putting it way up there, especially if we're using the tone that I'm thinking, which is very similar to mine, there's going to be some real boomy effect if he's on the lower strings, the E, A, and I don't know if he plays the 5 string, certainly a B. But, so, is he playing chordal stuff, or is he playing, soloistic stuff? Because soloistic stuff sounds more like, Dream Theater's bassist. What is his name? John Myung?
Yeah. So, if you
he's so cool.
The instance I was talking about with the dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun, guitar down low, bass would be like... Dun,
That's so tight. Okay. I love that, especially if you have the meteor tone, right? That's awesome. And it I mean, like, based on what you played, for some reason it makes me think of Orion by Metallica, right? Where it's kind of in the mid-high register, right?
Yeah.
And it's doing something kind of soft sounding, right? Yeah, I'm all about that, actually. And you're kind of selling this album to me a little bit when I don't actually like Tool. I didn't listen to it at all, for the record, because my opinion of Tool beforehand was way skewed. And then I just looked up the length because someone told me it was like 2 hours. The digital version, which has extra tracks, is at 86 minutes 38 seconds. That's an album.
Wow.
Yes, and so it starts out with 2 solid songs, but then in between every song is jungle noises. Literally, birds and monkeys in the rainforest is one of them. Another one's electronic marble sounds. Yeah, they're all just kind of filler tracks, and they have like Latin names, and one's called Chocolate Chip Trip, right? It's not really serious, but here's something I did realize. I've never had to ask myself, when's my next class before I start this next song, right? These songs are easily 12 minutes, 15 minutes long, and going on a journey with Tool. And yeah, that was different for me. And I'm not used to that, but like I said, every time I wanted to skip, it kind of went somewhere. And while there's so many places where there's no vocals, when Maynard does choose to come in, it's hooky, it's right, and it's tight. And if no one has ever heard Pussifer, it's like Lucifer, but with a P at the beginning. That band is really impressive to me. And he exhibits the same kind of showmanship there. And maybe even more because they do costumes in that band. But on this album, when he drops in and he means it. You know, he makes it count. And yeah, so I don't have much more to say about this except, the jungle sounds. Man.
So I'm looking, so that's on the digital version. I'm assuming you're looking at the digital version because what you were referencing, the difference between the physical is only 79 minutes, but on the digital, there's all these tracks that are like, there's one that's like 2 minutes, one that's 3 minutes, one that's 4, and they're all labeled as like instrumental, right? Chocolate Chip Trip, Mocking Beat, Legion Inoculant. These are such Tool names. Josue, aren't you a Tool fan?
Yes and no. I listened to them in high school for a little while, and then for me, I always felt that like if I heard one of their songs, I kind of knew the rest of them based on like the tone. And I actually heard what's that one called? Fear in Inoculum. And I heard it, and I was like,
title track.
Oh, this sounds like the one from this other album that I've already heard. I felt like I'd already heard it before, and even though it's brand new.
Interesting.
Really?
That's for me, just because I don't know their catalog well enough, though. I cannot speak for that, though.
There's cello right off the bat, and it's got this electronica. That sounded like Tool to you?
As soon as I hear that tone, that bass tone come in, I'm like, this is Tool. I just know it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I was talking with Jacob about this before. The snare sound. He plays with the snares off. And that's just so wicked cool to me, man.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
Really?
You know what I'm talking about? He plays like the snare drum with like the snare, so you just hear like a timbali kind of sound.
Yeah.
Like it's just like a tom, and that's just it's just as soon as I hear that, I'm like, nobody else plays like that. You know, it's Tool.
Danny Carey. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I have a lot of respect for Tool, but then I also don't know their catalog so well. But I thought it was I thought it was a really, really cool song, especially the Indian percussion stuff that you were talking about. Like,
what is that?
Like the Asian. I'm not even sure, man.
It has a small face on it. It's not a big face drum. It's got a small face and it's round, right? And you play on a small spot.
Was it? I can't remember what the sound that I heard was. Was it like a tabla?
Similar.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Something like that. Something like that. But I mean, yeah, that ambient percussion stuff is really cool. I think, just because I'm a percussionist, but.
So all in all, I forgot to mention that, yes, the name of it is Fear Inoculum. It's like the title track, right? And if I was going to rate it out of 10, I think I would give it a very respectable 7. I listened to it again.
Wow.
I listened to a lot of other things first, though. However, Tool might have to just work on me. And I have listened back, and especially Tempest has some great guitar moments in the bass. In fact, there's an excerpt I'm going to send you guys where the bass is handling almost the rhythm guitar. And it often does while the guitarist plays lead. And yeah, it's just so awesome. And, you know, like Meshuggah, right? I love them now, but they had to grow on me. There's a lot of bands that had to grow on me. And, you know, that's a whole topic in itself. Should music have to grow on you? Or if it's good, should you just get it? You know, that's something that we can get into now, or maybe cross your fingers on it. But yeah, I might just have to listen a little more to get to like that 9. I was amazed. I felt like a 9 at times, but
I mean, just from what that single that you've heard, that I heard, I feel like they did like a really good job at giving the fans what they wanted. Would that be a fair assumption? And I mean, dude, what, they knocked Taylor Swift off the the charts?
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Taylor
Dude,
Swift like just dropped an album. #1 pop star like in the world just dropped an album, and Tool was like, "Nah, girl, get out of here."
I've heard a song of it.
I love that.
Sis.
I love it so much.
I love Taylor Swift, dude, but just that's so respectful, like on its own, dude. Like
It's
this band that was not around for like, that's insane. That's so cool.
Maybe that's a trick. Maybe you should put out a lot of albums and then take a 13-year hiatus.
And then beat Taylor Swift. I mean, that's the
timing of it. The timing of it, right? It pissed a lot of people off, right?
Taylor Swift fans were mad. Yeah. I haven't even listened to the new Taylor Swift record. I won't get into Taylor Swift right now. Yeah, that's the point. She just released the new record. And
is it Reputation?
No. Reputation's old. The new one's called Lover. And it was just released like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then Tool released their album like a week or 2 after, and just went to #1 and took Taylor Swift had no time at all to be #1, which is just crazy.
Oof.
And Taylor Swift fans are of course upset about it because they're like, she deserves to be #1 and stuff. And honestly, like, I was a Taylor Swift fan, but I can't. The new stuff I just don't like.
Jonathan, do you have any comments about that?
I love Taylor Swift.
All right, dude. When you're talking into your mic, though, you're like so, like peaking so hard. Just talk like normal.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I mean, about the Tool album, I just didn't expect that. I thought it was like, I didn't expect pure instrumental the whole time. Like, I mean, there was some vocals, but it was like a lot of looping. I listened all the way up to like the 10th song, and I was like, I'm out.
Then you made the journey, brother.
Yeah, it's only 10 songs long.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Okay.
I mean, I can tell you right now, I couldn't get through an hour and a half of Tool. Even if I like what I'm listening to, I'm going to turn it off at some point.
Yeah. I was just cleaning I was working and I was just listening to it, and like, I mean, I mean, you're gonna hate me because you like the band, but it sounded they're like they all like have kind of like the motif where it's kind of like they're gonna be vamping the same thing for a bit. That I didn't know the difference between each song. I didn't know when the songs changed.
Vamping. Tool has never vamped anything in their life, but that is the terminology, and I love that. That's so near and dear to my heart. They're vamping.
So on the vamping thing, actually, that's hilarious. But I was just reading like the Fear Inoculum like song wiki, and apparently on the song, the one y'all were talking about, Loudwire described it as having Middle Eastern drum patterns and called it a slow burn building to big cathartic crescendos.
Yes.
Which is just a long vamp, if you really think about it. A build to a crescendo, that's just a giant vamp. So
I did enjoy some of it.
Dude,
Oh,
no,
sorry,
they get into some rhythmic goodness there.
Yeah. They could drop some horns. I wouldn't mind.
That would be pretty cool, actually.
They have a lot of electronic sounds, more than they've ever had.
I'll have to check. I feel like Brain sold me on this.
Me
I need
too.
to check out the album.
Actually, I mean, I'm sold a little bit. The one thing that keeps me hesitant is like what you said, Josue, about all of it sounding the same. It reminds me of like Dream Theater. A lot of Dream Theater can sound exactly the same as every other Dream Theater. It's like select stuff of Dream Theater that's like prime material. And even though it's complex, it sounds like the same thing as everything else, right?
What's your favorite one?
Favorite Dream Theater?
Yeah.
Octavarium. That album is just, it's so good. It's
what
so
song?
Good.
One song.
Oh, one song? I'm gonna actually say Octavarium. Let's play.
One song for me?
Dream Theater. Yeah.
I don't think I could even name you one song.
Damn.
That's crazy.
Sadly.
Under Glass Moon, right? Or maybe Dance of Eternity.
Oh yeah, actually,
Sure.
I know them better than what I know the titles of the songs.
By the way, the little riff I sent, there's a little sweeping bend riff, right? That's from the Dance of Eternity.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Did I listen to that one?
Yeah.
I feel like you sent a bunch, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. Tool album in the bags. Actually, one final thing I want to mention, because it is on the top of the charts. I don't know if it still is, but it was beating Taylor Swift. Brain, when you just talked it up that whole time and then came down to a 7 and said it was a 7, I was like, what the heck? Because to me, a 7 is just like a... I mean, 7 is quite... If 5 is average, 6 is above average, and 7 is just slightly above the above average, right? It needs like 8 or above for me to start thinking it's good, right? But then just about every reviewing magazine or website or whatever gave it like an 8 or above, except for Rolling Stone, who gave it a 7.
Well, I meant no offense by it, and actually I think there are some epic moments, but some of them are kind of far in between. And I honestly feel, and this is kind of where I stand with these songs specifically, you have to be in the right mind frame to be willing to just hand the reins over to them and honestly go with them on a bit of a journey. And, you know, it's strange because in person, we're often much more inclined to do that. If an ensemble was like in the recital hall of your university and they were playing a rhythmic groove that did go places, you'd bear with them. But on a recording, it's so distant, we're so quick to shut it down. And one thing that is redeeming is this album has a live feel. So you can almost imagine the guys in one room jamming this. And if you really try and allow it to take you on a journey, it will.
Do you think like the album is more passive listening music, or is it more active? Passive being like post rock or something that you just put on in the background versus
It's very active. It's
really.
like Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. Don't listen to it if you aren't going to give it every bit of your attention and go on the journey with it. Does that make sense? Yeah. No one puts on, that kind of a concept album passively, right? That's the kind of thing you trip out to. You play it backwards maybe, or sync it up with the movie, right? I mean, that's the kind of music you give attention to. And this needs some attention, especially because of the polyrhythms. You're not going to be able to feel the sense that, oh, they're not lining up. Oh, now it's lining up. If you're not actively engaged with it, you're going to miss that.
Interesting.
Money.
I honestly don't think I will end up giving it the listen that you want me to give it then, because I mean, it takes a lot for me at all these days, even bands I like, to go and sit down and like listen to a full album, because it's a lot of time, right? And I'm such a believer that a full album is like a story and you should listen beginning to end. And there's certain albums I won't even listen to because I know I need to listen to beginning to end and I don't have an hour, right? And so I might listen to one track, but it's going to be, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to get me listening to the whole thing with an active
How do
listening.
you feel about that? That dichotomy.
What do you mean?
Where there's some stuff that is worth listening to, but you just set it aside because you can't give it the time it needs, and you rarely have find time to listen.
It's a struggle, and I don't know if you guys actually. I've said this to multiple people that I find myself just not listening to music, and it blows my mind because I'm the composition major, right? And I'm supposed to like have more rep in my bag than anyone, right? I'm just supposed to be able to like, talk about different motives and stuff and be a theory nerd and whatever. But man, I just find that I don't have the time, and even my favorite bands, my two favorite bands actually, Oh Sleeper and Thank You Scientist, both released albums this year. I've probably given their albums each 3 listens through total. That's it. It's just
it's tiring.
Just listening to music when you work on music all day, it's just I can't do it, honestly. And it's a little sad, right? I wish I could sit down and appreciate. So the Thank You Scientist album is actually kind of similar to Tools in that it's extremely long. There's like 15 or 16 tracks, and they're all like 7-8 minutes long. It's like a long album, and I couldn't name a single one, like except from like the first single that they released, that I can like hear in my head, right? Because it's just like I've listened all the way through once, and that's, it was like a one-time experience. I don't know where I was going with that, but I wish I could enjoy it the same way that I enjoyed their previous albums when I would like, I guess, listen to their music in the car or something. But I don't really drive that much anymore, and when I do, I'm not listening to music. I'm listening to nothing.
It feels good to listen to nothing.
Yeah.
Especially when you're around this all day, all the time. I drive in silence some of the time.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Just thoughts.
Just to hear nothing, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think often actually about how someone from the outside hearing me say that would think about me as a musician, right? They're like, well, he doesn't even listen to music, and like music school ruins you because you don't even like listening to music anymore. It's like, it's not really that. It's actually that you're more involved in music than anybody else is, and so adding more music to that schedule is kind of just, it's too much,
Amen.
Kind of sucks. Cool. Is that everything on the Tool album?
Yep, done.
Nice topic choice, honestly. I'm glad that we talked about that, because that's such a big thing in music right now, because it took down Taylor Swift. I don't know why I love that so much.
I learned that right now from you.
Oh, really? You didn't know that? When you messaged me and told me that you were doing the Tool album,
You gotta
I was
respect Taylor
yeah.
Swift though, because
no, go ahead. You gotta respect Taylor Swift, cause
like
Yeah.
going back to the whole Tool thing, right? My first impression of it was like, I've heard this before. And Taylor Swift, like, I hear something new that she's coming out, and I'm like, okay, what is this? I'm like that whole Reputation album thing, it was so different, and that's just so cool, dude. Like, when artists continually, like, I always think of like David Bowie, who like always reinvented himself, and that's just the coolest thing you can do as an artist, man. Like, I remember one of my favorite bands, the Mars Volta. Each one of their albums was always like super different, and it just went in an unexpected direction, and it pissed fans off, and that's wonderful, I think.
Yeah, we're just like rotating through topics right now, but that's actually a thing that people point out. They're like, if you produce the same album over and over again, people are going to say, it's the same music you've already done and it's boring. And if you change stylistically, people are going to complain that you're changing too much. There's no winning here. But in my opinion, I think changing every album is probably the better way to go.
I think change is great.
Yeah,
yep.
I think so. I think of like Reliant K, pop punk band. And then like in 2013, they released like an album that's basically straight like electro pop. And all of their fans were so mad, and I love that album. And it was just, it was dope. It was awesome. All right, next topic. We can move into Josue or Jonathan's, but I think Jonathan, do you have a topic? You're technically next.
What do you got, Jonathan?
Let me just make one up while we do Josue's.
We don't even have to, honestly. Mine's going to be pretty meaty and long-winded. So, Josue, what do you got for us?
Okay, well, I don't know if you guys remember when we were all sitting in music class and we were played Rite of Spring.
Mm-hmm. Dance of the Youths and Maidens, right? That's where we started?
No. Well, yeah, right. We started there.
We started right at the beginning with the bassoon.
Yeah, the bassoon, right?
Yeah.
And we always talk about the bassoon and the timbre, but then in like the third, third little movement or whatever, that's called Game of Abduction. There's this one timpani part that absolutely blew my mind, and I remember looking around the class, and everybody was like focused and like they're like, okay, yeah, this music. And I was just like, my jaw was like on the floor because I was like, did anybody else hear this? And it was this timpani part that goes boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom. And I was like, that's hip hop. That's a backbeat. And this was released in 1913. You know, playing something that's like, got like really popular, like what, 70s, 80s? Because I remember I looked up a lot of music from like the 50s and 40s. Nobody was doing that, what that timpani player was doing. And I just thought, oh my gosh, Stravinsky was even more ahead of his time than I ever realized. You know what I'm saying? Because he gets a lot of credit for like his, the metal. I don't remember which one of you guys told me that like there was this one metal band that did like a cover of it or something, or like had a song that was directly
you're cutting out a lot, Josue. Sorry, can you say that again? You're cutting out.
Am I? I'm sorry.
Ghost BC has a song called Body and Blood that starts out bum 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 bum.
Right. Oh man, I haven't heard that. Should I look it up right now?
No, it's not that great. We might get sued.
True.
That's true.
That's true. None of that's allowed.
No, that is a great timpani part. It's where it's like boom doo doo boom 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 doo. Yeah. And the dancers are running, right? And they're being chased around the stage. And
I I checked out the score, and it's funny because I felt it in a different time. I heard it like it's a 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, and it's written in 3. It's like 1, 2, 3, and it's like that part that goes doom starts on 3, end of 3, sorry, and it's just the spacing of it, the placement is just so weird. When I looked at the score, and I was like, oh, I didn't feel it this way at all.
Oh,
yeah, actually,
1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, something like that.
So it's like and 3, and of 1, and then 2, 3, and 1, and 2.
You can quote him on that, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean,
Check the score.
that's very yeah. Check the score. Your local school library actually probably has it. See, that's interesting because isn't that? I mean, the most famous part is "Dance of the Youths and Maidens," right? And with those weird accented beats, a modern composer wouldn't write those weird accented beats like he did in the time that he did. A modern composer would actually probably just change the time signature a lot. And so it's interesting. I think it's actually just very Stravinsky-esque to do that. And maybe, I mean, I don't know if like that like backbeat groove is exactly what came directly from that part that you're talking about. But I mean, maybe that's what we did. Maybe we just changed the meter of everything that Stravinsky did and like put it into something else entirely.
True. Well, besides that, you know, you've got the jazz stuff, which was like doom da da doom da 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 da, and that's where like the whole rock thing from the 50s came from. But I know I tried to look up a lot of stuff, and I was like, man, I'm not finding it in the 40s and the 50s, and I didn't hear it till like the 80s, which I thought was crazy. You know what? 60 years later,
1913
right?
was the premiere.
Yeah. Which is just wild.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the details on Rite of Spring, but obviously there was like the whole riot and everything on the premiere. Did it start to get performed consistently at a certain point? Like, was it like way later? Was it in the 20s or 30s, or was it like it premiered and then had the
Was
riot?
it a decade later? Was it a decade later, or am I
I don't remember.
not remembering that correctly?
I feel like
I feel like it was a minute.
I don't know. I could try to find it. I'm just on the wiki page right now, but I'm not really sure. Interestingly, the wiki page on Rite of Spring actually just has cutouts of the score with like theoretical analysis of like 4 measures, and it's like this part is this and that, and it's like that says enough about the Rite of Spring. You know, the fact that they have all that on the wiki page.
All right. I just forgot how much I love that. The ba 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 bum 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 bum. It sounds Oompa Loompa-ish almost, right? It's just it sounds very close to my heart.
I wonder what would have happened if they would have played it on a bass drum and a snare. Like that would have just been the final. I literally invented hip hop
with the dancers like the terrible.
I guess that's why they were so riot, right? They were just way too ahead of their time.
Yeah. You guys know the riot was actually because of the dancing, right? It wasn't because of the music. His music wasn't that whack. Yeah. So I'm reading here.
Dancing.
I'm sorry.
Dancing freaked everybody out.
Yeah. Yeah. Which actually it's I forget who was the choreographer, but he got more trashed on than Stravinsky did. So what we were talking about the decade later, it says on Wiki, many have called the first night reaction a riot or near right. the riot. This wording did not come about until reviews of later performances in 1924, over a decade later. So it looks like the later performances actually didn't happen until like a decade later.
Dude, it kind of sounds like maybe there wasn't quite a riot, and that's just something people have kind of perpetuated because they want the Rite of Spring to bear even more of a reputation, right? But maybe it wasn't quite a riot. Maybe some people stood up and it was hard for them to go on, and maybe the idea that people tried to set the place on fire is a bit of a stretch, right? I don't know. But yeah, it doesn't seem
that's pretty metal.
Yeah, but that's not the kind of people who go to opera don't behave that way, especially those people then, and that doesn't sound right. However,
go ahead.
It might be.
I'm actually reading on the Wikipedia. They're saying that the riot happened. The Nijinsky, who was the choreographer,
right? That was the name.
Yeah, his assistant, Marie Rambert, recalled later that it was soon impossible to hear the music on the stage because of the rioting.
People screaming.
Yeah, I mean, this might just all be like, maybe they got together and they were like, let's just make this whole thing like, controversial so we get attention. I don't think Stravinsky needed that as a composer. I think he probably already had his reputation. But
yeah, see, when I hear riot, I hear, okay, just grab the guy next to you and start punching him in the face because it's no rules and we're all just going to be animals and set this place on fire, right?
When I thought riot, I thought like they were throwing tomatoes at the dancers and stuff.
Breaking
like
the theater.
Rotten food, yeah.
That's what the movie depicts, right? I forget what that movie's called, but the movie that depicts... Is the movie actually called, like, the premiere of the Rite of Spring or something? It's like a whole movie about the Rite of Spring. And in the movie, they depict that kind of stuff. Throwing tomatoes is the standard depiction of a riot, right? But I wonder if in, like, classical times or classical thing, a true riot is just a person standing up and being like, well, I never... it's like...
I think like in Shakespeare's time, right?
Well, I thought in Shakespeare's time they were more casual, right? In the classical period, they were more casual about operas and stuff. They didn't care about people talking and stuff, right?
Well, I don't think there was operas like in Shakespeare. I think he did plays, right? Yeah.
Shakespeare's
but it's like,
Renaissance, right?
You had the cheap seats, which they weren't even seats, right? They were just standing, and then it's like, they're tired, and then if they didn't like something, they're just like, this sucks. You know what I'm saying?
Is that a real thing that happened to Shakespeare?
I think so, right?
I don't know. I don't know Shakespeare that well. I mean, you're out of all four of us, you're the play guy.
I think like in those days. Probably.
Side plug, this is totally not relevant to anything, but since we mentioned Shakespeare, my choir is actually doing a full set of all Shakespeare texts, and we are performing at a pretty prestigious performance thing in Maryland. That's all collegiate choirs, and we got selected for it, and so we're going to be flying up to Maryland to sing an entire Shakespeare set, and that's pretty dope.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
When?
November. I'll give the details for listeners later on of what this actually is, because I don't remember exactly what it is, honestly. But we're doing like if you guys know Jaco Montiervi, he's a choir composer. Like, we're doing a new version of Come Away Death that's like a choir version, right? And it's like super tight. And we're doing like The Bird of Dawning is a Shakespeare text. And we're just
Death
doing
is pretty tight.
You say Death is pretty tight?
I mean,
yeah, sure.
That's cool, man. We should all fly out to Maryland.
Dude, it's straight up it's costing my school like $25,000 to fly the choir up there.
Whoa.
Yeah.
No.
Sounds pretty prestigious.
Apparently. I don't know. So back to Rite of Spring.
Are we? Are we?
I don't
Are
know.
we coming back?
No.
Are we
no,
done
we're
with the Rite of Spring? So we're gonna move on to the next topic of conversation, which, unless Jonathan has something, is my topic, which will be the final topic of the episode / evening.
I'm good.
All right. So I'm super excited for this topic because we are going to talk about Milton Babbitt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So I'm
Great.
I'm gonna give some information here on Milton Babbitt for the people who don't know. So Milton Babbitt is what we call an extremely academic. Oh my gosh, an extremely academic composer. Now, in general, we refer to composers in the modern age in two different ways, right? Not in the pop world. In the pop world, you say producer, composer, whatever, and it all means the same thing. But in the classical and jazz world, so you have academic composers, and then you have like entrepreneurial or media composers. Academic composers are something that started around the 20th century, and it's music for music's sake, and the continuation of music at a very intellectual level that your average listener could not really appreciate. An example perfectly being what Brain started us off today, saying he was listening to George Crumb's Black Angels. The average person really would not like Black Angels, and it kind of hurts your ears. And a lot of this academic music does. It's a lot of electronic stuff. It's a lot of like screeching strings and stuff that would normally be considered completely unmusical. I remember a lot of people describe Prelude Opus 25 by Schoenberg, the first 12-tone piece. People describe it as a cat walking across a piano. Now, once you really start getting an ear for this stuff, it doesn't sound like a cat walking across a piano at all. And there actually is very clearly some like form and structure, and there's that academic side to it. And actually, it's kind of a bop the more I've listened to it. Check it out, Schoenberg's Prelude Opus 25. But, so with that being said, there's this guy, Milton Babbitt, who in the 20th century was really heavy on the academic side. And basically exclusively academic side. And at this time, you have to understand that people were experimenting with like weird electronic sounds because computers have finally become a thing, and people are using all these digital sounds, and it's like their first entrance into this, right? I guess I should say this is all this academic stuff is contrasting modern music, which modern entrepreneurial or media music would be examples of, like film music, video game music, stuff like that, that the trained composer composes, but is for a more, let's call it a pop world, right? But still written by like trained composers, like Alan Silvestri and Howard Shore, and we can even say Hans Zimmer if we want. Before I get started into the real meat and potatoes here, does anyone have any comments on Milton Babbitt before we go into this?
Yes, I remember the professor who I had in junior college who showed me all the most intense music and was into Webern and Schoenberg and Berg and a lot of the real experimental guys. He said Milton Babbitt, however, is the one guy I cannot get a grasp on. I can't get an ear for him, and I've tried over and over, right?
It's true.
So,
I remember that, actually. Yeah, I remember that happening. Which is interesting. Sorry. It's interesting because the more I've learned about Milton Babbitt, the more that there is to him as a composer and as a person. So, for those of you who don't know, if I recall correctly, Milton Babbitt actually created the doctorate for composition. There was no doctorate in composition until Milton Babbitt came around, and it was not, DMAs did not exist yet. DMA, talk educational perspective for people who don't know, there's two different types of doctorates. Actually, there's like a bunch, but like in the music world, you have DMAs and you have PhDs. PhDs are technically considered a little higher level, and PhD is a philosophy doctoral degree, right? And they're considered a little higher because you have to write, well, you have to write like your dissertation and stuff, and sometimes a DMA, which is a performance doctorate, you don't actually have to write a dissertation. You have to have like a recital or something like that. And generally, PhDs are considered higher class doctorates. Everyone's still a doctor if you have a DMA or a PhD or whatever, but a PhD is considered a little higher class, and not so much in the United States, but elsewhere, if you're a doctorate with a PhD, they'll say Dr. So-and-so PhD as opposed to just Dr. So-and-so, because a PhD is kind of worth a little bit more. So Milton Babbitt created the doctorate in composition, and it was a PhD, is my understanding, because Milton Babbitt is kind of like a lot of the 20th century composers, and he's kind of a philosopher, right? And it's this philosophy of taking music and moving it forward, whatever forward means, right? And so he has this article, and I would encourage everyone to read it, because it will blow your socks off. And some of you, like, I remember when other people read it, they were complaining because the article is so extremely pretentious sounding, and they didn't even know what it was saying half of the time because of the highly intellectual side of Milton Babbitt as a person. By the way, if you Google this dude, he looks like a nerd who could beat you up. He's like a wrestler type looking guy, but he has like big old glasses and he looks super geeky. But this article is called "Who Cares If You Listen?" And it's this whole long article, and I could link it for you guys. But you can just Google "Who Cares If You Listen Babbitt" and you'll get it. And the general idea is that Babbitt got to a point where he said composition should not be based on people's ears that are not trained, basically. He's like, I don't care the number of listens that I get. I don't care who is listening to this, because, I mean, I don't care what people who are not trained think of this, because they don't know anything about academic music. They don't know. It would he equates it to science, actually. He puts music in the category of the sciences and compares it to like astrophysics and advanced chemistry and stuff like that. And that he's like, you can't have someone who's just like, oh, look at that rocket. That rocket's blue instead of white, so I don't like that rocket, talking about astrophysics or something, right? That's kind of how he equates it. And so he had this idea that colleges that teach composition should be a place where people are studying the further advancement of composition as a science, and not for the listenability of the common man. And so that's what colleges of composition were in the mid-20th century because of Milton Babbitt. They were just these little hubs where these pretentious, I say pretentious like in a non-negative connotation, because they actually were very much so intentionally pretentious. This hub where these people would just analyze each other's music as they experimented with electronics and whatnot. Someone go in, like, what are your replies, thoughts so far, questions?
That's right.
I totally forgot who Milton Babbitt was. To be honest, I haven't thought of that name in so long. I have not heard his music. I have no comment on whether he's pretentious or not. I know you had pretty strong feelings about academic music. I don't know, man. Right now, I guess I haven't had, like, I know we've talked about this before, where you said you're so, like, your ear is tired of listening to that kind of music. I guess mine isn't, because I'd be excited to hear, the pieces that you hate, and give them a listen. Not today, though, but... as a science.
So,
let me get back to you. Let me relish it.
So let me read this one quote from it. And this whole article reads extremely complex. But here's one quote from the article where he says, "Why should the layman be other than bored and puzzled by what he is unable to understand, music or anything else? It is only the translation of this boredom and puzzlement into resentment and denunciation that seems to me indefensible. After all, the public does have its own music, its ubiquitous music to eat by, to read by, to dance by, and to be impressed by. Why refuse to recognize the possibility that contemporary music has reached a stage long since attained by other forms of activity?" And then he goes on, "The time has passed when the normally well-educated man without special preparation could understand the most advanced work in, for example, mathematics, philosophy, and physics." And he's equating music to science there, where it's like basically saying you can't understand this music because you haven't studied it, and you shouldn't have an opinion about it, basically. Your opinion is totally irrelevant.
Well, all right. My first impression of that last snippet is like, if you're a chef.
Whose dog is that?
Mine.
Okay. Lovely. That's my first impression, too.
So, that kind of, to me, is like a chef saying, if you're not a chef, then what you taste doesn't matter. And whether you think this food's good or not doesn't matter. And I know I don't agree with that. But what Milton said, maybe I agree more with that than the taste thing, because taste is such a sensory experience, right? And music's no different, right? So I'm finding them very near and dear. And yeah, I'm not sure that
I think
it's valueless, because it's a sensory experience that they're absorbing, right?
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking out loud, but something
I don't think you have to be trained to enjoy it.
No,
if it is, I guess it might not be enjoyable to everybody, but
same thing with art or sculpting or architecture or, of course, food, music. There's a lot of things. I enjoy my cell phone, but I don't know how to make that. You know,
yeah.
I enjoy a lot of things that I don't understand, and but I get what he's coming from. Yeah, people who.
Well, I mean, I guess some opinions matter more than others, right? Because my opinion on food isn't going to matter as like a professional food critic, right?
True. In you guys' opinion,
first of all, I don't even like vegetables.
I missed what Brain said entirely.
No, what?
We missed what you said because Josue was saying he doesn't like vegetables.
All right. No, but I respect y'all's opinion on my composition a lot more than I respect like a cashier at the grocery store's opinion. You know, there is a level of value, but that's not even that important to me, really. What is important is how do you think about composition? Some people think of it as it's sound capture. You close your eyes, there is a sound that you hear, and you use your compositional techniques to extract that and get it into the real world where it can be heard, right? And other people can do things like build to compose pieces, right? Steve Reich's clapping music is a great example where he's literally just constructing using some kind of algorithm, right, of repeating motifs or using, you know, he composed that piece in his bedroom on a piece of notebook paper. Right? Theoretically, he didn't really bring any sound forth. And I can guarantee you the fifth and sixth cycles, he isn't hearing that in his head. You know, this is all an experiment for him in mathematics and in music, right? So do you consider both composition? Or do you consider composition, the idea of extracting sounds, because if you're doing that, Milton Babbitt is failing, right? He's not. I guarantee there's a lot of things he is not hearing clear as day and then pulling forth into reality.
There's probably some weird noise.
Man.
What is going on with that?
What happened? I don't know.
Y'all sound satanic.
I think if Brain doesn't know, then it might be on Brain. Well, Brain was talking. It's either
sure
on Brain or
Milton
Jonathan's
Babbitt.
end, I think.
Is everything okay now?
Yeah, everything's fine now.
It was
Okay,
Milton
so
Babbitt.
yes, the one thing about
Who's Milton Babbitt, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. So guys who are using these extreme techniques or doing these extremely mathematical things, they're not pulling sound forth that they're hearing. They're just kind of creating music. And if that's composition, then Milton Babbitt's right, to do what he does. But some people don't consider that composition. A lot of people didn't think Ornette Coleman's honk, honk, boo, boo, honk, honk, boo was music.
It's so funny. I actually, instead of my Milton Babbitt topic, I almost brought up a topic that talked about Ornette Coleman and the insistent musician of producing music that other people don't listen to, but is revolutionary later, right? Like Ornette Coleman.
That would have been dope.
But it's still on my list. But so it's interesting that you say, is that composition or not? And it has to be, right? So I'm going to say, I'm going to try to say this as in the most unpretentious way possible. But a lot of people think that composition is something that it's totally not, and it's not until you get into the really academic world of composition, all the in-depth thought that goes into composition and how much more in-depth this stuff is. It's not just hearing something and putting it on a piece of paper or whatever, and people are like, like Michael Jackson was a great composer and stuff, and it's like, yeah, actually he was, and he had an amazing ear, but he also couldn't write a symphony if he tried, Like, and there's all these details and stuff to that, and there are, as a composition major, our goal is to learn all of these different tools, right? In the 20th century, with Milton Babbitt and all these people, unlocked so much. But you're saying, like, is it composition or not? And there's
It is.
It is, but there's
what I'm actually asking is composition the building of music or the pulling forth of sounds that you're imagining? Because it's got to be both.
It is kind of both. And Brain, I think the sound is on your end. But it's sort of pulling sounds from your brain to write them on paper or in Finale or Sibelius or whatever, or just to play them, is one small minuscule way in a sea full of different various ways to compose. That's only one. I remember one of our professors, who I think you guys know what I'm talking about, said that you have to learn the other techniques to compose, because when you are a professional composer, you can't wait around for divine intervention or divine inspiration rather to get something.
You gotta make it happen.
Yeah, that's super inconsistent, way inconsistent. So you need all these techniques to compose. And I was talking to my composition professor recently about, she was talking about the psychological aspect of composition, talking about Brain, I think I told you this, the Myers-Briggs, how the personality test, how the middle two letters were designed by Carl Jung, the philosopher. I'm INTP, right? And so the middle two letters are either T or P, and then F or N, right? So F or N being feeling or intuitive, and then thinking or perceiving. And you're two out of those four. And those are actually different compositional ways. And we were talking about, how do I as a composer compose? Well, I mean, how would you guys think that I as a composer compose, knowing me? Like, what is the way that I probably start compositions?
I feel like you sit with the bass
Yeah,
and
I feel
pluck
like
stuff out,
no.
and then you're like, ah, this could be this, or this could be that.
That's actually how I started originally. But you know what happened is that it's super inconsistent. And now I think so critically and analytically about music. For the most part, I start from a theoretical side now. I'm a thinking composer first, actually. And if you tell me to compose something, I start analyzing, well, what's my form going to be? What's my instrumentation going to be? What's the tempo? Where's the climax? Stuff like that. It's all theoretical first. And a lot of the academic composers do that, and I think that's what Milton Babbitt was doing. Is he was expanding music for music's sake from a thinking perspective, because electronic music hadn't gotten to where it needed to be yet, right? And he was essentially saying that we're expanding this world, and the rest of the common man, the layman, can eventually get this too if they so desire. And people whistling down the street won't be whistling Mary Had a Little Lamb. They'll be whistling microtonal music. Which they don't, right? 60 years later or whatever, they don't.
No. All right, you said something that really stuck out to me. You're talking about the form, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen like singers who kind of look at songs from a more aerial view, whereas instrumentalists sometimes get tunnel visioned into their fretboards, right? And it's hard to find divine inspiration there. And singers will often have these descriptions in their phones of a song that is dark and moody at the beginning and then builds up and then there's a break.
Mm-hmm.
And then the chorus hits, and they almost have the whole thing plotted out, mapped out in terms of speed, intensity, where the climax is, right? And I never have done that before. And I would so love to either build one of those or receive a form of a song and then write the music that would fit that. And I'm going to try that.
It sounds very efficient and professional, to be honest.
Yes.
Compose
Like,
that way.
what is this song going to do? Is this going to be a functional song? If it's going to be in commercials, it doesn't need to be 7.5 minutes long with the climax around the 6-minute mark. Let's manage our time and have more repetitions and so on. Vamp. I love that. I love that, man. That people would probably, like jazz guys, might even say Meshuggah just vamps the same hemiola over and over again, right? It's just an open vamp and drop F sharp.
When people ask you what vamp means, I'm sure this has happened to you. People have asked me, what do you actually tell them? What do you define a vamp as?
We just play it over and over. Keep playing that section over and over.
Yeah, but it's like a build often too, and I'm like, it's kind of a vague term, isn't it? It's just like vamp, yeah, and everyone knows what it is.
Mm-hmm. Everyone knows you vamp the opening of a bossa to establish the rhythm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
No one just jumps into the girl from Ipanema. Measure 1. Or beat 1. Bink.
Yeah. True. So you back to the different ways of composing. There's also like, intuitive composing, which is something that I do, which is kind of the when you're composing, you get to a point sometimes where you're like, oh, you know what? This doesn't fit my structure or form. And even Schoenberg and Berg did this. I don't think Webern did. I think Webern was more strict about his 12-tone rows. But they did this where, they took the 12-tone rows, but they were intuitive at times, and they were like, no. We have to break the rules because we hear what should be going here, and it doesn't fit the rules, right? And And so that's like intuitive composing. And then you've got composing by feel, which is kind of what you were talking about actually with singers who, you know, they're like, oh, it's dark and moody and then this and that. And it's just totally feeling. And it's just all emotion. So there's all these legitimate different ways of composing. Milton Babbitt was trying to expand the thinking perspective, right? And I wanna read another quote here, because it just hammers in how like elite he thought that this level of composing was, and it was up there. I mean, I don't understand the theory of Milton Babbitt, but he says, imagine, if you can, a layman chancing upon a lecture on pointwise periodic homeomorphisms. At the conclusion, he announces, I didn't like it. Social conventions being what they are in such circles, someone might dare inquire, why not? Under duress, our layman discloses precise reasons for his failure to enjoy himself. He found the hall chilly, the lecturer's voice was unpleasant, and he was suffering the digestive aftermath of a poor dinner. His interlocutor, I actually don't even know what that word is, understandably disqualifies these reasons as irrelevant to the content and value of the lecture, and the development of mathematics is left undisturbed. So, in the context of music, he's saying, you know, when you present Black Angels or whatever in a concert hall and someone's like, I didn't like it, it literally means nothing, right? It means nothing that they don't like it, because the composition is not for you. And your opinion doesn't matter, and chances are you didn't like it because the hall was chilly and you feel a little bloated.
As a mathematician, sometimes I look at math. Actually, I always look at math and I say, I don't like it. So that's the only thing I can say.
Mathematician.
As a mathematician. You don't,
Jonathan, I'm getting you a shirt that says that. As a mathematician, ...
Yeah. That's awesome.
I'm something of a scientist myself.
Yes.
All right, I got something to say.
Yeah,
all right,
go for it.
So I love how Shank, my old professor, right, used to always talk about how, the tricks, the gimmicks, the tone rows, the assigning numbers to letters, and, you know, using your mother's birthday to come up with a motive, and doing all the little tricks, right, are all means to get you to the point where, like Bear, like you mentioned, oh, we're so close, and now I actually hear something. Let me write this in. Sure. And then I'll continue to play with this rule, this algorithm, whatever system I'm kind of participating in to promote creativity, until I hear another moment, which could be. And you could put on 2 radios. And someone, I think it might have been you, Jacob, said that there's a guy who puts on 2 radios and listens to both on different channels until 2 things overlap. And then boom, he's like, oh yeah, it took me a while in the weeds till I found it though, right? And I thought that was cool. And I wanted to say that Maynard James Keenan of Tool always composes his vocal parts after the instrumentals. He says that every time he tries to bring poems or lyrics he's written and say, let's use this, or force them on to an instrumental, it never works. So he goes into the booth and he hears the instrumental and he gets into the vibe of it and lets it take him where he needs to go, right? And I find that singers often do that kind of thing. They think, what is this song telling me? What is the pathos of this song, right? And they try to channel that, and they think of the music in these much bigger chunks, this aerial view, you know, like seeing where it's going to climax and what's the mood. Where I'm worried about, should it be Locrian or super Locrian mode, you know? Really dumb.
Wait, what is super Locrian? Is that a real thing?
Yes. Here, you want to see it? You want to learn?
Just theoretically tell me what it is. I don't need to hear it.
It is the 7th mode of the melodic minor scale.
7th mode of the melodic minor scale.
Step, whole step, another half step, and then 5 whole steps out
That's
the end.
awesome.
Yeah. So it has this weird half steps and then brrr, half steps. Brrr. You know, it's like a ladder it slingshots you up through the scale, I think, maybe. But yeah, so that's kind of my thing with the means. I think, to go back, this is all a means to creativity, right? For me, like 12-tone rows and using tricks, you know, until you get to Steve Reich. And then you're like, no, I'm going to map this out and we're going to do clapping music, and that's that.
Well, no, I mean, it was a little earlier too, right? Like, again, like Schoenberg broke his own rules sometimes, and I mean, I think they all did, but there were some composers who were very strict on, no, the system is what's writing the music, not me, and they would not break any rules at all. It's not a means for creativity. It's full on, the system is writing, not me.
Who's the guy who did total serialism through dynamics and articulations and note choice? Is that Babbitt?
I don't remember. I was thinking about that too. I don't remember if it's Babbitt or not.
Yeah, you see all these. You see like mezzo forte, quadruple piano, you know, quintuple forte, piano, and you just see all the articulations all over the place. And it's called total serialism, right?
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself because I was typing and trying to look it up. It is called total serialism. Yeah. I just wanted to see, actually. Wait, here we go. Was it Boulez? No.
Boulez?
Is it Boulez? Is that the French name?
I think so.
It's just I'm just reading some random thing, and it looks like Boulez has some article or something called Schoenberg is Dead. And I guess that's probably where he talked about total serialism. Yeah, actually, that makes sense. Yeah, after Schoenberg is when... Yeah. This is all coming back to me. Because Schoenberg started it, but then people didn't like it, that he didn't commit to the system, right? And so then they really committed to the system afterwards. Yeah.
And that was all a system of trying to treat every note as an equal, right? For anyone who's watching and doesn't know, they were of this opinion that it doesn't matter if we're in a key with one flat. We're going to have B natural, you know, when there's a B flat in the key signature. We're going to have, in fact, every note repeat before we use another B natural. You're going to hear a B flat, you're going to hear an A, you're going to hear an F sharp, you're going to hear every single tone before that comes back. For anyone who isn't familiar with what we're talking about.
Yeah, so the general idea is that these composers, the serialists, but also the set theory composers, the idea was, it's like that chart I was talking about, tonality is dead. Tonality meaning that there is a home center pitch. They're like, no, we don't want home center pitches. And so in order to get rid of a home center pitch, we can't just take away harmonic function, but we also have to make sure that every note is played equally. And so that's the general idea. And most of this music is not tolerable for the average ear. You get used to this stuff though, as you start going through it all.
I feel like it's not tolerable because of how systematic it is. Right? You know, you're not composing from like, you know,
the pathos.
You're not living.
It's 100%.
You know, you're not living. Exactly, right? So, you know, you've got, I don't know, Beethoven's 9, right? You know, his whole life is basically that piece, you know, like all the hardships, all the struggles he went through, you know, that's that. And, you know, with this stuff, it's like, oh, it's a system, right? And that's, I think, the trouble that I always had with that kind of music was really connecting to it in that sort of way. Where it's like, okay, you know, I hear this, I appreciate for what it is. I'm going to forget about it in 20 minutes. You know what I'm saying? It's
not going to get stuck in your head.
It's provocative. though, and that brings us all the way back to something I really want to address, which is it the purpose and function of the university and the conservatory system to promote the growth of music composition in a science if it's in that way? Or is that a closed-minded look? I'm not going to blame Milton for this, but do people who think that the mathematical entanglements of music is the future, are they missing the point? Is that maybe just a trend and a blip in the timeline? The same way we've had many blips in the timeline. And maybe, people in the Baroque era had the same mentality that, oh, this is the way it should be done from now on, the future, right? And every subsequent generation, right, is like, no, now this is the way. And I'm wondering if the future of it is going to be through that kind of digging into it, or is it going to go back to more of an oral tradition? And also, is it the function of the college? I don't know. I think that if the college is being honest, all that's kind of part of a trend, and that trend will pass.
It's a trend.
If they latch on to that, then they are seriously limiting themselves in the future. But, because they're thinking about dollars and cents. Just like there's not a pop program at my college. There ain't gonna be. That's also gonna be a trend that passes, and we've almost seen rock music,
It already exists.
slide into the background, So I'm not sure if the college will ever be the melting pot where music is seriously studied as a science, right? But it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a conservatory or 10, right, around the globe where people really did get Fibonacci medieval on this shit and just use use AI. I want to know what kind of patterns can AI find in music that then we can implement in our composition techniques. Like, let's see what mathematics and physics and all these things we study can tell us, right? And let's have 10, 12 conservatories that just do that only, right? And then we'll have some others that are very artistic and women grow their armpit hair out and what have you. They're very liberal and I'm just kidding. But is it a trend? Go ahead, you guys.
So, someone else, I have a lot of replies, but I've studied this stuff and this is kind of my area. So someone else go first.
There actually exists,
Jonathan?
like, there's a artificial intelligence because I was doing computer science for one of my classes, and it's like one of these like artificial intelligence that learns from what it does. And somebody fed that AI a whole bunch of like, I don't know, like Beethoven, Bach, Debussy, whatever. And then after that, it just got the AI to start making its own music. And, it was interesting because it would go in and out. It would go from, no, that doesn't make sense, to, no, that was super cool. So, like, the computer was really learning.
I swear I saw like a Google Doodle one time that
Yes, you did.
was creating
Yes, you
music,
did.
right? Based off all like the Bach
Yeah, I was.
piece, right?
Yes, you did. Yes.
I think I messed with that. That was fun.
So I was actually going to bring it up since Jonathan said it. I'm glad that you brought it up. Adam Neely actually did a video on this. And basically, for those of you that don't know, it was like an AI that someone designed that was supposed to follow like theory, common practice period, part writing rules, and write like 4 bars, whatever, in those rules. It sucked. The thing broke rules everywhere. It was terrible. And it did like augmented seconds, unresolved leading tones. It went to like whack chords that came out of nowhere that sounded super romantic or 20th century. The thing was terrible. So like we are experimenting with it, and the science for this experimentation is happening. And Brain, you said, you know, like let's have just like 10 schools. Well, I mean, there's actually like probably at least 50% of the music schools out there are doing this. And the ones that like Milton Babbitt was involved in, the really elite like Ivy League stuff, are actually still doing this. They're doing like music research stuff, right? And so I don't think it's a problem. Basically, okay, so here's my take on this. The music research was extremely important to the music that we have today. And I know we're talking about like we want schools that teach rock and pop and stuff. And you can name schools. University of North Texas has so much jazz integration. I mean, they've got jazz vocal degrees and stuff. And then of course, everyone knows the name Berkeley, right? Berkeley is rock, pop, and jazz. And that's like it. In fact, so much so, if you're a classical musician, they want you at Berkeley because they don't have enough of them. They only have like rock and jazz guys auditioning and stuff. So that already exists and the transition is happening. But basically everything that we have in electronic music that we work today, you know, with DAWs and like I'm working in a programming language now called Max MSP. It's like it runs on C program language, but it's like a digital interface that a lot of composers use to create plugins. Basically, like that's the program that they use for that stuff. But all that stuff came from Milton Babbitt's like and obviously like Edgar Varese and all those people and their experimentation for furthering music. But what the pop world did instead of taking their weird stuff, we took all the good stuff that they did, right? And I mean, you wouldn't have NWA without Milton Babbitt. You wouldn't have Taylor Swift without Milton Babbitt. You wouldn't have Tool without Milton Babbitt and his experimentation.
So we took the good stuff.
Yeah,
that makes sense because all those people that you talked about approached it from like a very feel kind of perspective. So, you know, of course they felt the things that, you know, that feel good for all of us, and they just took the best parts of it, and they know what the best parts are, you know, because they have that intuitive sense. What always struck me about all those early electronic stuff, and every time I hear like electronic elements incorporated into like this like modern contemporary music, classical world thing, I'm just like, man, it sucks. Don't you guys know how to use synths? You know, like it's like, oh, this is an electronic piece. I'm like, yeah, it just sounds terrible. You know,
are you talking about the old stuff or modern stuff?
Huh?
You're talking about
like
old
I'm talking
stuff?
like, yeah, like who was that guy? Varese, whatever.
Yeah.
Edgar Varese.
All that stuff from like this.
Yes, music concrete.
Yeah, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. You know, all that stuff that incorporate. I guess the technology kind of sucked anyway, but it's like I was like, you know, there's nothing really. I don't know. I just want to hear like a modern symphony written with like some Dilla beats. That'll be so cool.
Well,
you know,
that's already happening is the thing. But the problem is, I mean, like, I know you're saying you want to hear it, but we just don't do it in the symphony because, I mean, when we're saying symphony, we don't mean a literal symphony, but we're meaning a symphony orchestra, right? Symphony orchestras don't perform anything new. The newest stuff symphony orchestras are performing is like John Adams or something, right? They're really, really, really stuck in the common practice period. But they're starting to move over a lot. They realize that the only way that they're sustainable is actually playing film music and video game music, because that's the classical side of this stuff. And pretty soon, you'll start getting hip hop beats and synths and stuff mixed in with these symphony orchestras, I think, because that's actually where film and video game music is going, right? A lot of
In
it
another
nowadays is
in
that
another
stuff.
150 years, probably.
No, dude, I think
Considering how.
yeah, considering how behind they are. But
Yep.
I mean, I think it's gonna be like 20 or 30 years. The symphony orchestra either dies or adapts and starts playing this stuff. I mean,
You know what's adapting a lot? Musical theater music, right? They totally went from that whole Broadway kind of like old-timey kind of vaudeville style to like,
yeah,
boom, it's like got like pop rock, Hamilton, right? Like revolutionary.
straight up,
All the
yeah.
hip hop stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean,
Like that's so cool, you know. Go on.
no, I was just gonna say, I mean, like, I was thinking of Dear Evan Hansen. Dear Evan Hansen is basically the whole thing. It's not big band, right? Like old stuff is. It's like indie rock most of the time. So much so that indie rock bands would like cover Waving Through a Window. Like if you type that into Spotify, there's like indie rock bands who are doing this like Broadway musical stuff, you know?
That's just so cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I guess my final question on the Milton Babbitt thing is, do you guys think that music should be just composed and thought about just from the academic standpoint by some people? Yes or no? That's all you get. Yes or no?
If they want to do it, let them do it.
Do you think
Yeah.
it matters if people
My voice
listen to your
cracked.
music?
Yes.
So that's the anti-Babbitt statement.
That's not what I said. I said I care if people listen to my music.
Yeah, that's the anti-Babbitt statement. Because Babbitt doesn't
Then
care.
I guess I hate Milton Babbitt with a passion.
That's not what I meant. But
No, I get it.
I'm just kind of curious because other people.
Hold on, you
Go ahead.
cut it out. We all cut out. Can you repeat the question?
Do you care if people listen to your music? Do you think it matters? Or is your art good enough for the art's sake?
Okay. Well, I have so much music in my hard drives, and I actually deleted a whole bunch of stuff that I used to have a SoundCloud. I just deleted all of it because I was like, man, I just keep the stuff for myself. I don't. Yeah, I want people to like listen to it, but a lot of it's like very personal. I'm just like, you know what? It's just cool. Like it's therapeutic in it of itself for me to just write it. And I'm just like, okay, I released all these emotions out and I let this go. It's so personal, and you know, I don't really know if I want people to listen to this right now, you know. So I just store it away. I don't know.
That's good. Yeah.
Very good.
Any final thoughts on that? I feel like we're about wrapping it up
Yes.
here. Go ahead.
I think the best music out in the year 2050, right? In the year 2070, in the year 2090, right? In the years to come, I have all the faith in the world that it will be music of the oral tradition that is from the heart, from the pathos, and
Exactly.
The more techniques though and options and AI and stuff is just going to push people who are already creative on their own so much further, because they're going to have a wealth of people like Babbitt and Schoenberg to kind of look back on, and that's why music history is important, right? But yes, I think the music that survives the eons will be music of the heart and less of the head. Because, funny enough, music, that's how it travels, by sound. isn't
You're
until
right.
very recently that music traveled by means of paper, right?
Mm.
And when I think about Sweet Child of Mine or Sweet Home Alabama, right? I don't think about paper at all. I think about the vibrations and I think about maybe the frets, right? But no, it is, as soon as I can, I get off the page because the music isn't on the page and it's in the air and it's between us, right?
Music is expressed. Music is.
True. And
I mean, like,
go on.
When you were saying about that, like the whole Milton Babbitt and stuff, like Steve Wozniak was sort of like the brainchild of like all the electronics and stuff, but it really took Steve Jobs to really push it out there and like to integrate it in all of our lives, to create that sort of take those, that circuitry and to turn it into a way of life. And I feel like, I need to listen to Milton Babbitt, but I think, you need that kind of certain kind of brain to discover all those possibilities that, somebody that has like the pathos wouldn't know to seek out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think it's pretty cool.
think you should combine the pathos and the logos together. And the third one, the ethos, doesn't really come into this, I don't think. Produce music unethically unless you steal it, right?
I don't think so. Right? Well,
you kill someone because it's for the music's sake, right? The sound of a person being murdered is a track that has not yet been recorded.
You're right.
There's ethics involved there, but that's like the kind of academic stuff that, that these people do.
Exactly. So, yeah, that's kind of what I think. The ethos has kind of always been intact with music. And, yeah, it'll be extreme situations where we have to do that. Ooh, final thought. I was thinking about art performances, right? And how some people get really into the music. And there are people who have drawn on themselves or even cut themselves on stage, right? And I just want to put this out there as a thought experiment. Imagine there's a guy who's singing maybe on campus as a busker or, who's singing around town, right? And he's playing and everything's going good and he cuts himself somewhere. And he keeps playing and he gets even more emotional. People are going to be a little weirded out, right? But they might not stop him, especially if he does it again and again. They might start to see that there's some kind of statement, I think, being made, right? People tend to let that behavior go on if you're performing, right? But I'm just curious, at what point do people step in and go, dude, no, now you've cut yourself one too many times and I'm cutting you off. No pun intended.
They don't. So you were talking about this, and I was like, it's like you were describing the scenario that I remembered in my head, but I was trying to remember who it was. I don't remember the exact person. One of the black metal people, one of the vocalists or guitarists, right, of the 90s and 80s Norwegian black metal, they would do all kinds of stuff, right? Remember, they burned churches, and Varg killed the guy from Mayhem and stuff. But one of them, I forget who, someone's going to know this name, and I've been out of black metal long enough that I don't remember the name. But he did exactly that. He went out like on a couch in public or something and just was stabbing himself. And just was like on the couch, like singing or playing guitar. Or maybe he was just doing it as performance art or something. Just like bleeding out. And it's my understanding that like nobody stepped in and just like let the art happen. And there's like photographs and stuff of this event where he was just like stabbing the crap out of himself. And then, I mean, black metal is... Go watch Until the Light Takes Us if you want to learn about black metal. That documentary is intense. But, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so I just thought about that. At what point does someone come up on stage during your open mic set, right, and stop you? Can you imagine an open micer like, yeah, I'm going to do Wonderwall, and then they get up there and they're just cutting themselves through the whole song? I know, Grizzly.
Well, it's interesting because it actually kind of depends on the setting, right? If you're out in public and you if you look like Brian Wandra and you're playing singer-songwriter type stuff out there and then you cut yourself, people are probably going to call the cops because they think you need help or something. But if you're like a black metal looking dude wearing all black leather with like spikes all over you and stuff, and you look like your name is Varg Vikernes, then people are probably not going to stop you if you like stab yourself or something, and probably not think too much of it, which is odd. Also, in a concert hall, like a college concert hall or something, if you do it as part of your composition, are they going to stop it? Right? Are they actually going to stop the self-mutilation and stuff for the sake of the hall, even though it's a composition? I don't know.
What if the piece was easy? Go on.
No, I was just thinking about it.
What if the piece was easy, like clapping music or pendulum music, something pretty easy to put on, but it required the performer cut themselves seriously, and so your piece rarely gets performed because no one has the balls to do it, and it takes a long time until someone has the courage, and then they'll perform the piece. And that's the factor that keeps it from being performed, and it becomes almost a rite of passage. It's like, oh, you haven't done, Dance of the Dwarves? Everyone's done Dance of the Dwarves here. It's a rite of passage. You dance on glass or something. I don't know.
So, side note, I can't believe, this is the name that I'm about to drop, but the name that I could not remember of the guy who frequently cut himself on stage, all the black metal people have, metal stage names or whatever. His name is literally Dead. Dead was the guy who would go out on stage and cut himself and stuff. He was the vocalist and lyricist of Mayhem.
Whoa. That's an inside joke. I'm dead. Right. Nice to meet you. Hi, Hungry. I'm Dad.
Funny, he was actually Swedish and then died in Norway.
All right, boys.
Well, there you go. That's probably going to go on the title of this episode. Tool, Rite of Spring, Milton Babbitt, and cutting yourself on stage.
Yes, bro.
I mean, there's. What if I just put "and dead"? That's a really far range. All right, well, unless anyone's got any final thoughts, going once, going twice, going thrice. All right, that'll be the end of the second episode of the Music Mentality Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in, although none of you are tuned in because it's not live. Hopefully we get to be live next week. Actually, I might try to have this live streamed, this recording, and live stream it, even though it won't actually be live, but people can watch and chat live or something. I don't know.
I would love to get into the chat too when it plays.
Just talk crap about ourselves. Yeah. All right. I'll see you boys later. Bye, everybody.
Bye.